listening to Adventure Party for the third week of April 2022. This week, the disputing duo wait to be ambushed, trying to decode which segment they're acting in, as they begin combat with the Tome of Gygax. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and relay gaming the Irish way.
Warlord Scarr, how you doing, old friend? Oh, it's cold out there. It started raining again. The promise of an early spring has been snatched from us. But never mind. We'll fight on. We'll battle through. And we will prevail, won't we?
It's my job, I guess. That and reviewing the Tomes of Gygax, a treatise on how to run your D&D game for first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but mostly war.
Well, I was going to say we should get absolutely wrecked on brandy, but I suppose we could do Tome of Gygax instead. Hey, maybe even do both.
Perhaps.
Do you find yourself in a combative mood tonight, Warlord?
I do, but I suspect there's going to be an awful lot of faffing about in between me and the combat, because we are about to embark on the combat section of this Dungeon Master's Guide. I could dive straight into the text.
No. That's not a good idea. If you're reading along at home, folks, it's edition 1 and page, I believe, 61 in the edition we're looking at. I, for my sins, am drinking something that says Innocent Gun on the can. Innocent Gun, I don't know if you're familiar with it, folks, but it was a very good line of beer coming out of Scotland back in the mid-2000s. And my brother-in-law, bless him, he'll never listen to this, he headed across the border on a scouting mission and came back with a few cans of this stuff that says Innocent Gun. He'd heard all about it. Unfortunately, this is a pretender. It is some limp lager and has none of the bite or the ruby redness, the promise, or the heat of that fabled beer. If you can find old-fashioned Innocent Gun, I highly advise you to tell nobody and drink it. But anyways, I'll drown my sorrows with cheap beer. Oh, I just had to get that off my chest, you know.
That's fair.
Innocent Gun, if you're listening, what happened? If you're being held at gunpoint, blink or something. Let us know. And
use our speak pipe. No one's used that in a while.
Has anyone checked it in a while? Get back to us and let us know when you're going to start making the good stuff. Who's used SpeakPipe? Okay.
The Nerds RPG Variety podcast, where our friend Jason uses it quite a bit.
Yeah, big shout out to Jason.
It's an interesting endeavour, but it's tied to Anchor, I believe, which it's more of a podcasting community, or at least it was, and we tend to go our own way with a lot of things, so...
Oh, well, inside the fence. Oh, look, we could talk about communities and acquisitions and things like that, but we'll save that for another time.
Perhaps episode 700, which is coming up very fast.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. So, folks, if you have suggestions for what on earth we're going to say during episode 700, please visit our Discord. Link in the show notes. I'm
starting to get worried that we're going to hit episode 777 and we have to do some form of weird episode about gambling.
It's hopefully that's going to be someone else's problem. That's what, 2 years in the future? Something along those lines?
It's a year and a bit at most.
Year and a bit. You're in the guts. Okay, right, look, I'm going to wrestle you back into the arena. All these wild tangents, these forays and what do they call them? Flanking maneuvers. No. Back to the front line now. Combat in First Ed, where everything was straightforward, right? This is going to be fine. And I'm sorry, folks, I don't know if you're picking this up on the mic, but there are dogs murdering each other on the canal where I live. So that could be coming through. The dogs of war have been unleashed. Let's go.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it's quite straightforward to go from, the growling to the biting in D&D. Okay, I have a couple of thoughts. The main thought that I had as I was reading these chapters, and I've gone to, I think, at least like 20 pages into this, at least, and the thought that kept coming back to my mind is, none of this is in the player's handbook? Because this is all, to our modern sensibilities, in call it the third ed plus sensibilities that I got from starting at 3rd Ed. The idea that huge chunks of the fundamental rules of how to roll dice and kill goblins are not visible to the players, but are rather sequestered away for only the GM to see.
We should probably just look at the player's handbook to confirm these suspicions at this point. I'll put that on my to-do list, because we keep running into this, don't we? It's like, where the hell is this? What? I mean, it could just be that Gary decided to pad out by repeating some stuff.
Possibly, but like the way this is all laid out, it does feel like there's an attempt to make sure that GM is the one armed with the mechanics of combat, which is unfortunate because the mechanics of combat are the disaster that you may have heard if you've heard tale of AD&D from someone who likes White Wolf better.
Well, it raises the question, like, why on earth would you tell players what the rules are? You tell them what's happening, they ask what they're going to do, and then you decide, right, okay, the system's a bit nuts, I might just make up what happens. I'll roll a few dice, make a show of looking at a table.
I can certainly see why someone would be tempted to run combat the way, but we'll get into that once we get into the grappling rules.
Alright. They're my favourite part of D&D combat.
They're not better here. I'm going to say that much. Actually, they might be some of the more comprehensible parts of this, but anyway. I do want to, however, start with a classic Gygax. I'm about to do something naughty rules-wise, but first I'm going to say how that is not what I wanted to do. Let me just get the exact quote.
You're not starting the start, because I'd really like to just cover the first paragraph, if I may, while you're looking for that.
Okay, go ahead.
Folks, while the Warlord's off digging up a suitable quote, the first paragraph of this is a bit of a jaw-dropper. I mean, if you thought I was surprised by 15-foot corridors, wait till you hear this. Encounters Combat Initiative. Combat is divided into 1 minute period melee rounds, or simply rounds, in order to have reasonably manageable combat. Let's just pump the goddamn brakes for a second. A minute? I thought combat was a 6-second thing. Like, oh, everything happens in 6 seconds. It's very cinematic. Manageable, in quotation marks here, applies both to the actions of combatants and to the actual refereeing of such melees. It would be no great task to devise an elaborate set of rules for highly complex individual combats with rounds of but a few seconds length. It is not in the best interests of an adventure game, however, to delve too deeply into cut and thrust, parry and riposte. The location of a hit or wound, the sort of damage done, sprains, breaks and dislocations are not the stuff of heroic fantasy. The reasons for this are manifold.
When did Rollmaster come out? Because this sounds like he's attacking Rollmaster, or some similar, hyper-complex percentile system that had come out in the time since.
But worse than that, everything he says here has been completely ignored subsequently. 6-second combat round is how I learned to play D&D. He goes on to sort of point out in the very next paragraph, hey, hit points aren't actually just your health, man. They're more of an abstract thing, dude. So maybe let's not get too wound up about how that works. But of course, this is all, I mean, the amount of blood and ink that's been spilled on these two topics alone down through the last 40 years, I give up. Clearly, nobody goes and reads the foundational text. This is the first I'm hearing this nonsense. A minute for a combat round, in which all sorts of things could happen. But no, it's 6 seconds of shutterbug, motion frozen in time, decompression, as every single shuffle of the foot and twitch of the sword arm is now laid out on the table. We made a wrong turn, friend, somewhere along the line.
Okay, so on its own, I get the abstract. I get what he's going for here is the idea of sort of extracting everything out, turning each character's thing into a minute of action. So you roll your attack roll, but it's not just one stab. It's your D20 roll is the culmination of an entire 30-second shot of you arrow flooding your way through the goblins or whatever. I get that, but in a page or so's time, he's about to completely undermine that entire argument by cutting that minute-long melee round into 10 6-second phases.
What?
Or segments?
Phases? Oh my word. I was with you, Gary. I was with you and you left me behind. What's going on here? This is too much. I'm getting whiplash. Combat injuries. Be damned. This is too much for me now. Okay. Anyway, what were you looking for? Did you find it?
I was actually looking for the quote that was in the middle of that paragraph. It would be no great task to devise an elaborate set of rules for combat.
He's not wrong. It's quite easy to make something complicated and bad. It's harder to make something elegant and simple.
Well, I just say it's one of those times when Gygax has sort of quoted his own demise in this, because, as I say, 20 minutes later, it takes 20 pages for him to get to the hit charts, which take up a sizable chunk of page. The organisation of this has always been weird and haphazard, but it really goes downhill with the combat chapter. First off, it takes a while of grinding through the text here to even sort of pull out this concept of phases and such, because he doesn't start with this is how one of those melee rounds is broken up. He starts with, this is how a tiger jumps out of the closet and kills your character, because he has to start with the surprise rules.
Yeah, that's the first thing you check for.
That in itself is an interesting way of going about things. It's more important than what order people go in is who gets to go first and how much they're buffed by this. So basically, depending on your fictional position and stuff, but the default is both sides roll a d6. And this is not individuals. There's side 1 and side 2. Each rolls a d6, and if you roll a 1 or a 2, you are stunned and cannot react for that many phases of the melee round.
Segments? Is this what they're...
Yeah.
It's segments, isn't it? Right. The 6-second segment. We're so close to greatness.
When someone who is surprised gets attacked, the creature that attacked them gets to use all their attacks as if they'd gotten a melee round, even though it's only a segment that has passed. So, right. As I say...
So they unleash on them for a minute inside of 6 seconds.
That's my understanding. Okay, you could... I am perfectly willing to admit that maybe I took this up wrong, because, as I say, this is where the text gets a bit impenetrable. But my understanding of this is the example is the bear comes out of the closet and he gets his claw on his bite.
Well, that's a surprise for you. A lot can happen in 6 seconds if you've been surprised and you can't respond.
Yes, which is why 6-second combat round is now the standard for a lot of RPGs.
I do like that 1 minute and then sort of narrate the action around that roll, rather than, I swung and I missed. Rather, you swung a whole bunch of times, but they evaded. That's combat for you. Also means that 4 rounds of combat took 4 minutes. Between the spells and the cut and the thrust and all the dying. 4 minutes later, everyone's bloody exhausted. Narratively, very satisfying. As opposed to 24 seconds later, after a whirlwind of destruction goes off, like someone kicking off a Tomac reactor, combat ends. So 4 minutes of madness, as opposed to 20 seconds.
It works better with sort of the expectations of, say, a movie or a television show fight scene, where most fight scenes will last 3 minutes, unless it's the end of the movie or something. Your 3-minute fight is sort of a standard.
Lots happen.
Fictional receipts, but yeah, most of that will be simple back and forth thing. Your arrow fled moments, and there'll only be 3 or 4, really significant turning points in those fight scenes. So I that sort of makes sense in that regard. But it seems that Gygax was struggling with how long things take in an actual fight versus the impulse of his players to go, I attack, I pick up my dice, I throw it. That is my attack. That is my swing of the sword, because that's intuitive when you are sitting at a table and you have a dice in front of you and you want to attack. I feel like the weird haphazard nature of this is an attempt to try to play both those sides, but I'm not sure.
Okay, what can we usefully say about the surprise rules here? Because we do need to press on. It's a big section. Okay, there you go. If you do nothing, you're surprised. Bye-bye. Go on.
The problem is, the surprise rules are, I think, if you play the surprise rules as they are written in this book,
and there's quite a few of them,
you are going to kill someone's PC and they're not going to be able to do anything about it. That's just going to happen because it's a random chance. Someone's going to roll 2 on their dice, be stunned for 2 rounds, and it just happened that it was a bear, and the bear is going to roll all 15s to hit and just tear some poor goblin's thing, new player's PC apart, and there's no amount of good to play other than arguing with the DM to not have a surprise roll, which is allowed in these rules, but is not a rule. It is a assumption that, if players are super sneaky or super smart, they can bypass. They cannot be surprised if they are in the right fictional position to not be surprised. But that's an argument, not a rule. And nerds aren't good at having arguments.
What kind of nerds are you hanging out with?
Basically, I think this one set of rules is an awful lot of where first ed D&D's reputation as PC unfriendly is going to come from. Right.
So, with that said, assuming you survive being surprised, or you get the drop on someone, we move on to initiative.
This is the one with there's a chart to explain the chart.
So, with that said, moving on to initiative. So, assuming you're, as you said, that part even survived being surprised. What do we get fresh here that Gygax is? So I'm curious. Like, initiative has seen a lot of changes, and there's lots of different flavors of initiative now. What was the original like?
Well, as I said earlier, it is a party-wide thing. It is each group of combatants has one initiative roll. I think there's rules so that if someone has individual dexterity bonus, that they can move in a different segment than other people, but it's still that one side acts first, and then any initiative bonuses are just to... This is a complicated and unclear section, so much so that when I was looking it up, I found a sort of fan explanation guide, a PDF called Addict, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Initiative Combat Tracker or something.
Right.
It's 20 pages long in order to be as complete as possible. Just to cover all the different exceptions to initiative in AD&D, because depending on what you do, you could bypass what we would consider an initiative system because of the type of action you are doing can sort of supersede any rolls you make, but it also depends on how the enemy reacts to you. I'm not sure I could really decode what's going on here. I props the person who wrote this Addict PDF to explain it all, but it is very much an eyes glaze over sort of situation for me.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, while there's a lot of numbers and tables and things applied in D&D, as you say, it's not necessarily something you can compute. It has, at least in its earliest iterations, sure, there was some numbers and framework there, but the GM was adjudicating. There was a sort of wisdom of Solomon aspect to it. They had to make decisions based on all of the rules that they either knew or understood. Might not be exactly the same thing.
That's true, but they're not all in the same place. There's not a list of, as I say, someone actually did make a list of, here's all the different exceptions that the book suggests. It turns into a 20-page, flowchart, situation, which the editing of the early 80s was not equipped for, and so all these first exceptions are sort of sprinkled throughout the combat chapter on each of the actions.
Yeah, desktop publishing was a great boon later on, allowing you to, and frankly, listeners have heard me rant about this before. More flowcharts, more graphs, more illustrations, more worksheets, and less long descriptions in line.
Yeah, I don't want to complain about this too much. It's very much a what are you doing based system. It's like, you say what you're doing, and then we determine if that means whether you're going first, depending on what the other people are doing.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
That's I could see some people kind of liking it better that way, but as I says, it's very difficult to manage, and it is going to require GM adjudication, which presents the probability that a GM might accidentally or semi-deliberately start choosing tactics for their monsters to counter and get the drop on them and get their stuff to happen first. And then you have players coming back saying that because they can't see the initiative system, that means that the GM is sort of making things up. And I can very easily see that while this is an animal attempt, in the cut and thrust of play, where, it's humans on either side of the table, that the arbitrary unfairness of D20 plus add your dex modifier could very easily have come in simply as a sort of arbitrator that allows actions to be sort of semi-random and thus, fair, as it were.
Yeah, just to land back in the text on the subject of initiative, I do notice this piece on parlaying, which every good buccaneer should be familiar with. Upon encountering another party, the party with initiative, because we're talking about initiative, can always elect to attempt some form of communication. There you go. You can talk to the monsters. Or the monsters might even choose to talk to you rather than, okay, let's start swinging clubs. So friendly gesture, throwing down of arms, offering a treasure, some spoken word or phrase. And just what the effect will be is determinable only by the DM, considering the prevailing circumstances. So yeah, even with the supporting sort of framework, it's really sometimes down to, well, what seems like the right thing to do here.
It's just a little bit interesting that the order of operations is to determine surprise, then determine initiative, and then there's a counter reaction roll, D percentile, to see whether they actually want to fight or not.
Or just stay out of a fight. I love that the awaiting action, she gets a line and a half. This is self-explanatory, not an attempt to parley, but neither an attack. It is seldom utilized by experienced adventurers. Okay, I don't know. Wait and see seems like a pretty wise thing to do sometimes. Say, experience has taught me not to just take a situation on the face.
I guess the idea is you're supposed to be able to tell that apart from, bracing your spear or anything, which is a separate type of action.
Oh boy. We crack on?
Yes, well, we actually finally get to the part where you start attacking people. But of course you have to start with missile weapons, or missile discharge, because logically, arrows go further than weapons.
It also feels like this might be sort of coming out of the chainmail kind of hereditary, where, yeah, we're going to volley of arrows before we get to skirmishing. Okay. Reasonable, I guess.
There's also a lovely section of near algebra style stuff for determining friendly fire chances.
Oh, goody. Okay.
Where every normal size creature counts as 1, every size S creature counts as half, every size L creature counts as 1.5, and then you're supposed to add that up to determine the random chance of...
If you've got halves, just make them wholes and make all the other numbers bigger. Don't make this complicated.
Don't make this You can't give Gygax advice for not giving this complicated.
True. Okay. Fractions, baby.
And then there's a separate section on grenade-like missiles.
I hope he multiplies fractions at some point. That'd be awesome. He did do a game called Cyborg Commando later on that I had a copy of for quite a while. in its shrink wrap. I wish I'd held on to it. Probably worth quite a bit now. But I don't know if you ever multiplied fractions, but I do believe multiplication was part of the system.
Yeah, it was like it had a 2d10 system, but you had to multiply the results of the dice together.
Yeah.
You kind of had a D percentile, but it was heavily skewed by the fact of the way squaring numbers work. So, like, if you rolled a 7 and an 8, it was a 56. Or you roll a 2 and a 3, it was a 6. It was, I don't know. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I'm not sure I've ever heard great things about it.
Anyway, so where are we now? So, yeah, as you said, lots of stuff about the various ins and outs of missiles, grenade-like missiles. What else is in here? Including, oh man, liquid contents. And it seems to get a bit finicky, really. None of this seems to be attached to particular weapons. Just here's some special note regarding giant and machine missiles. And here's some other stuff about going across flaming oil. Yes,
it's weird how some of the most comprehensible parts of this are the cover rules, which is just a bonus to AC. But then you get stuff like where giants throw rocks at you. Apparently, you can't add your dex bonus to this because you can't dodge rocks. You still have your normal AC, so apparently your leather armor and buckler still count as defense against rocks, but not dodging. But apparently you could dodge arrows. I don't know what's going on here.
But don't worry, these aren't going to be complicated or elaborate rules. We got that promise at the top of this. Right, yeah. And then so presumably we get missile fire because it's quick and easy and you had your bow out anyways, you're not stupid. And then the pointy hats in the back have wound up their spells. So we move on to spell casting. And that's going to be fine, right?
Yeah, spellcasting during melee.
Yikes. It does make a note here. These functions are fully detailed in the player's handbook. So, okay, we know there's more to look at there. But it then does go for another, page and a half?
Well, yeah. The spellcasting section itself is, about a page, is about half a page, and then there's the usual side stuff. There's a whole bunch of weird little quirks in here. First off, there's the, if a wizard gets hit during a melee round, it just sort of cancels their spell. A lot of people were aware of that rule. There's also, rules like you have to say that you're casting a spell at the start of the round, and you can't take backsies halfway through because, during the missile round, the people you said you were going to fireball have all died.
Oh, so it has to go somewhere.
Yeah. There's also, explicit stuff that you can't hide the fact you can't go, I have really long sleeves so they can't see that I am a spellcaster. Apparently that is not a thing you're allowed to do. It is very much a feature of spellcasting in a combat situation that cannot be subtle, which is, I understand it as a cut and thrust to combat thing, but this is again one of those things that maybe should be made explicit in the DMG, if the PHB, if only to cut off those sort of subtly while they're distracted by the bard, I subtly cast Charm Person in the middle of the bar or whatever. But maybe it's just for combat spells or something. I don't know.
Right. I mean, it's by the rules, like, you stand stock still, you must complete what you said you were going to do, and anything, a whiff, a puff of smoke, a breeze through the back door, anything that interrupts you at all, and you're done. Nothing good comes of it. It's pretty restrictive.
Yeah, it does a couple of things. First off, it means you are reliant on having a strong shield wall of fighters and henchmen to put between you and the things. It also means that all ranged attackers are very dangerous for fighting wizards. It really makes combat dynamic and means that wizards are sort of incentivized to protect themselves against arrows. This is why protection the protection from arrow spells so important. Even though, like, in modern days, it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. It was vital back then because,
If you wanted to cast anything else during combat, you better have some screens up first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you were toast. Yeah, it's. I mean, we still have we've got concentration today, but the way it works, obviously, the way it in spellcasting works, like there's very little other than counterspell that is likely to interrupt you because none of the initiative, you kind of overlaps each other. Whereas here, you're making declarations about what you're going to do, and then we figure out who does it when. So yeah, you could get yourself in real trouble. I mean, the Gygax makes the point there, because spellcasting would be so difficult. I feel like I should have a Gary voice to make it clear, but I'm quoting now. Because spellcasting would be so difficult. Would he be the comic book guy from The Simpsons? Never mind. Okay. Because spellcasting would be so difficult. Ugh, this is getting awkward. Most magic users and clerics will opt to use magical devices whenever possible in melee, if they are wise. Which is interesting.
Yeah. It is this weird subtle things. It's like, it's sort of pushing. It's just weird because, like, he wants magic users to be really powerful and potent. It is, something that's really important to a party to have a magic user at the back. But the way these things is all incentivized, you really are being pushed towards using wands or scrolls or whatever, because those use the missile weapon initiative system, not the spellcasting initiative system.
Right. Okay.
And it sort of makes sense in the sort of treasure-centric world of AD&D, where having like a wand of paralysis or a book that shoots magic missiles or whatever, it becomes as important to a wizard as getting a +2 sword would be for a fighter, because it's a big safety net, essentially. It's just like letting you use some effect every round. It is interesting to see this sort of really difficult thing where even the act of getting off a single spell of your own is put in like it's this really big effort. I myself have my own thoughts of why we've moved away from that model and more towards the cantrip model that we use today, but that's a whole other episode.
It does sort of present an image of your wizards and clerics things going in as fighters sort of unship their swords and shields, and rogues draw bows and rangers sort of disappear into the shadows with knives. You do get that impression that, well, I'm a wizard, I'll shake out these long sleeves and John Wick it with as many wands and staves as possible. I'm just going to be hurling and throwing here. I'm just going to be blasting and dropping. I'll pick him up if we survive. Which is kind of the smarter play than cast a spell. Oh no, I need a comfy chair for that. That could take me all day. It's kind of, I don't know, there's something about that I quite like. It makes that acquisition of all these scrolls and staffs and things like that make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense in the environment that First Ed was built in.
But I think the acquisition's carried over. But I don't think the reason for having to do it, or the importance of having a bandolier full of wands has carried. Presumably there's like a wand quick draw feat somewhere.
Definitely wasn't Third Ed, but anyway.
Oh, was there? Yeah, that makes sense. I think get together with the artificer and figure out some kind of wand Gatling gun that you can put on your wrist. Right. Do you want to look at... Is there any particular bits of this that you want to...
There's just a few weird things. Stuff like, apparently...
Oh, brother, you ain't wrong.
Paladins are so holy that if you throw unholy water at them, it damages them like they were an angel.
Okay, yeah.
There's also what I like to call turning tennis, where if you have a bunch of undead and an evil cleric and a good cleric, the good cleric can turn the undead, and then the evil cleric can unturn the undead. And you could have a thing where you're going back and forth every round of sort of turning and unturning these undead. Like, so get a weird level of tennis until someone rolls 2d6s on their 2d6 roll and settles the matter.
I'm sure that never got tedious, but I mean, it is funny to consider, isn't it? Sort of like some sort of shambling Pikmin. Right. And Evil Cleric's turning undead, yeah, that's its own section here. Then we get, further actions on page 66, where I feel like I'm on firmer ground now. Oh yeah, actions. Like, I see charge there.
It's interesting that the charging action is different from the moving action.
Yeah.
Moving sort of this suckers game where you spend your entire melee round minute of just walking up to the people who have swords. Whereas charging actually lets you make an attack, but there's very specific setup, like of how far you can charge, and then if the enemy has pole arms, then they can bypass the initiative system and hit you first if you charge them, but not if you move up to... I can see why this takes 20 pages of PDF, but anyway.
Yeah. I'm looking at this, like, charge in particular is only one charge move can be made each turn. Remember, folks, we got segments. Thus, an interval of 9 rounds... Oh, they're rounds now. An interval of 9 rounds must take place before a second charge move can be made. Gary, 9 rounds from now, I'm either dead or having my dinner. That's not going to happen. I'll be charging precisely once.
I think that is the point. Then there's the actual strike blows action, which there's special initiative for when you're simultaneous initiative. Then there's weapon speed factors, which honestly I thought was going to be more than 2 paragraphs, but even then manages to be
puzzling,
useless, and puzzling.
Quixotic?
It's like it only matters if you are both sides are making melee attacks in the same segment. There's something to it, and again, I apologize to the people for underreading this, but like,
I feel like I've failed to fully grasp the order of segments and turns and rounds.
People have been failing to grasp that for 40 years, man. As I say, there are reasons why we use the incomprehensibly fast 6-second combat rounds.
I'm kind of warming to it, yeah. Fair enough. Right, so do we at any point... Oh no, I just saw grapple. Do we at any point get to some sort of resolution here?
I think we're just getting started, man. Oh yeah, there was this... I think there's a weird thing where if you have equal initiative, daggers get more attacks, and you know what? No, I'm not gonna. This is a weird exception. I'm not gonna.
We've got no time. 6-second rounds. We've got to press on.
Yeah.
Where does that leave us?
Now we're on morale, which is, I can see why the morale rules, as you can imagine. Well, actually, they're not that long. They're about half a page, but also there are degrees of morale. It's a D percentile system, which is like the D percentile, which is. Oh god, it's based on that henchman loyalty thing that we were talking about back in the henchman chapter. So we have to go back to
Oh no, please don't bring that back. But I think I get it. So the performance in combat will factor into it. Are we being hit more often than the other guys? How loyal do we feel? Are things going against us? And all of these modifiers add up to the percentile roll. And what's the threshold?
I think it's if you roll under your base 50% plus the modifier for getting your ass.
Plus, and just to make it complicated, that base 50% is modified by another 5% per hit die and 1% per hit point above any hit die. Come on, Gary. This was bordering on simple, and then you just had to. So I got to go going.
I think the most interesting thing about it, though, is that the degree to which you fail your morale check actually determines different types of behavior. It's not just run away. There's run away while fighting. There's disengage and retreat. Then there's flee in panic. And then if you've managed to completely rout the enemy, you can just get an automatic surrender.
This feels like another wargaming holdover. I mean, it's kind of down to the GM to decide when NPCs will flee or stand. But this is for kind of modelling this on a tabletop going, oh, well, there's hundreds of people here. I mean, some of them might or might not. Let's figure out why based on these numbers. It's interesting. I suppose, again, framework, a bit of a handhold, but GMs know when monsters will run.
That's sort of the great debate, is that a lot of GMs would rather they determine, well, I want to be the one who says how fanatical these orcs are, or if they're cowards and will flee at the first sign of trouble. But there are other GMs who claim that, no, I want to be surprised by the results. I want to roll the dice and see something unexpected happen every so often. So I think those are the kinds of people who prefer morale systems like that. But a lot of GMs prefer having the narrative control of, I think these guys would flee in this situation. And, again, no right answer, but...
Yeah, true. No right answer, and depending which way you prefer it, you're probably going to employ other kind of heuristics to figure out what happens next. So, yeah. Look, Gary is clearly in the latter camp. Let's see what the dice say, and then we'll go from there. No harm. Oh, well, if they run, we're going to go after them, right?
Oh, well, there's certainly enough rules for running away. There's a solid nearly 2 pages of pursuit rules for different environments. Apparently, running away in an underground setting is completely different from running away in an outdoor setting. And there are multiple different ways to run away depending on how much faster you are than them.
Okay.
There's lists and sub-lists.
Yeah.
The art of running away is an incredibly detailed. Compared to the, how the initiative system works, the running away system is horrifically over-explained.
Broken down a lot, yeah. A lot of lists here. A lot of ABC lists and points to step through. Again, this feels like flowchart would have been really useful here. There is a wonderful illustration on page 68 of this guy trying to get out of a room that's filling with water as undead emerge from the water to kill him. One of the few times the art in this book seems to line up with what they're talking about.
It is rather thematic. There's different rules for which monsters will stop chasing you if you drop your packed lunch in front of them versus if you drop thousands of gold pieces of treasure in front of them. So, those are both separate situations. Oh yeah, there's and reminders, of course, that you can't make a map when you're running away. So this is a perfect opportunity to just tell the PCs they have no idea where they are and get them lost in your mega dungeon. Nice.
Yeah, why not? And then size of party and available light. Lots of... There's a diagram here on 69 that covers... Oh wait, no, this is actually... We're back to melee, so... Did we get distracted by something? Have we shuffled... We've looped back to... Wait a second, we were killing each other. Okay, let's talk about it.
Do we want to leave melee for another day, perhaps?
How close are we to finishing this section? We're not anymore.
We are not. There's...
I just saw the tables.
We've just got to page 69, and it has not been nice.
Oh boy. Okay, folks. We might pick this up next time on the Tome of Gygax, when we actually, in the combat section, part 2, start talking about melee. It's some kind of mad purgatory. Yeah, it's...
as I said, we haven't got to grappling yet.
I'm sure the grappling rules will be absolutely fine. They'll be a joy. They're never complicated and overly wrought and somehow inadequate at the same time. It's only been the case for the last few editions. So, we hope you're enjoying our... Is this even a read-along at this point, or are we just venting?
I don't want to feel like I'm down on this book and Gygax in general, listeners. I just want to say I have difficulties with this section. And I'm sure it'll pick up once we get to magic items or a third chapter on hex crawling or whatever. I'm sure good times will come again.
Why is there a section on insanity in the middle of the combat? Okay, anyways. Find us on Discord. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, etc. Hell, I've heard this thing called SpeakPipe that the kids are all using now. If you can find it, let's make that a little Easter egg. If you can find it, and send us a message. We promise we'll check sometime this month. Check the show notes. I have been on this Tome of Gygax Melee Combat Rules Part 1. I've been Savage Mick.
And I've been Warlord Scarr, and I'm glad to get back to some very simple, logistical nightmares of destroying empires.
Well, yes, it's the big picture stuff. We leave the round by round stuff to the minions and henchmen and hirelings. Oh my. But for now, this party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike from Version 3 license.